Today we've got a great revenge story against a manager who fired all of somebody's favorite colleagues. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, someone has been trying to use my email address for years. I've had my email address since the early days of Gmail, and for the longest time there's someone out there who's been using it, trying, for all sorts of things. I've gotten gestation updates, financial aid notifications, volunteer schedules, job interview offers, and so many password reset attempts for other services. The person signed up for a streaming service. I changed the password, and they auto-paid for 6 months before fixing it. I scheduled that job interview, then rescheduled it. Recently, I got a payroll account setup email for a new job, I guess. I set up the account, later got the email that the email for the account had been changed. They signed up for a Starbucks account. I don't go to Starbucks. I got the happy birthday email from Starbucks yesterday. It's not my birthday. So now I'm drinking my free $9 macadamia something or other cold brew. I would tell them directly to stop using my account, but I don't know their email address. Usually I would feel like this kind of thing would happen with somebody who's older or maybe doesn't have a great grasp of the English language and is getting something mixed up somewhere. But for it to be somebody that is getting new jobs, is getting financial aid, is going to Starbucks, for them to keep using the wrong email and not realize it, I don't understand how that happens. Accomplished Bag 804 wrote, "Once I got 25,000 miles from a woman that shares the same name as me. She traveled to overseas, but on her way back, she booked business class. She used my email again for reclaiming miles, but I already have an account with that email, so I got them instead of her. I guess that's what happened. I then traveled 4 times, almost, for free around Europe." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is, you want to push in? Everyone else gets free coffee. This happened early last week. Things at work had been going really well recently, and in my latest review, I was given a bonus. So I decided to pay it forward while I visited my local cafe and pay for the order of the people behind me in line. There were 3 people behind me. The cashier steps aside for a moment just as a woman walks in and jumped to the head of the queue, completely ignoring all of us. I say to her, "Excuse me, you missed the line." She looked at me as if I'd spat on her and said, "My car is running, I'm working, I have to go first." I'm very non-confrontational, so I just roll my eyes and leave it. She pays for her order and stands to the side waiting for her drink. That's when I remember that I was going to pay it forward. As I got to the cashier, I loudly said, "Hi, I'd like to pay it forward and get everyone's drinks." Looked over at the lady and emphasized my last words, "who is behind me in line." She went very red in the face, but said nothing as I stood by the register and tapped my card for each person in line. The best thing was that the cashier seemed to have known she jumped the queue, because the woman's drink came out at the same time as the people who had been at the back of the line. So I think either what OP said was true and they intentionally made that drink come out really late, or not only are they the kind of person that walks in, storms past the line and says, "I'm working, I've got to go first." They have some unbelievable order with 4 pumps of this and 3 pumps of that and whole steamed this and that. You also have to shake it upside down and give it a warm hug before delivering it. Jerry and Tom wrote, "Baristas know. Trust me, they know. They can be the greatest or the pettiest persons on the face of the earth. Never tick one off. You'll be drinking decaf and not even know it. Love my baristas. They are 201, great at what they do." Our next story is how I got back at a classmate for posting an embarrassing video of my dad. A few months ago, my building's committee organized a small party for everyone living in our building to bond. It included some dancing and singing at the beginning and ended with a fancy dinner. My father was in charge of the food. During the party, the food arrived before dinner time to ensure it was fresh and was set up on the buffet table. My dad went over to check if everything was up to standard. Unfortunately, my neighbor, who is also my classmate, was there. He's known as the class clown and is quite popular on Instagram for the funny stuff he posts. He secretly recorded my dad and posted it on his story, labeling him as someone who only comes for the food and can't even wait for it. He also mentioned that he was my dad and added goofy music in the background. The whole school saw it, and needless to say, the next day wasn't pleasant. A few people mentioned it and brushed it off as a joke, but I was dying inside and knew I had to get back at him. Now, this guy is terrible at math and knew he would fail finals if he didn't cheat. His roll number was after mine, so he always had to sit behind me. Throughout the year, I helped him pass the exams, but now there was no way I was giving him any answers. He realized this just before the math exam and offered to pay me a few dollars if I helped him pass. I couldn't believe his audacity. Not only did he ask for help after making a joke about my dad, but his offer was also ridiculously low. I was about to cuss him out, but instead said, "Sure, you don't need to study at all. I'll tell you all the answers to the multiple choice questions and you'll pass for sure." The exam time came and I gave him the answers. After the exam, I asked him for the money, and he laughed and said, "I'm not giving you anything. You really thought I would pay you?" I laughed back and said, "You really thought I would help you pass after what you did?" He was shocked, and I told him every answer I gave him was wrong. His expression was priceless. I wish I could have recorded it and posted it on my story. A few weeks later, the results came out and he scored a 3 in math. He obviously failed and would have to repeat the year. I could hear his father yelling at him. A few hours later, I went to his house and showed his dad a screen recording of the story he posted. His dad, already furious that he failed, became even angrier. He then proceeded to discipline him right in front of me. I left immediately. I initially felt a little bad, but it was so satisfying. Apparently, his dad was so ticked that he permanently confiscated his phone. I'm glad OP was smart enough to plan around this and make sure that they got their revenge, which was giving them the wrong answers regardless. But I have to admit, I really would have loved this if OP had collected the money first and gotten both sides. One of those situations where you collect the money and you run off into the sunset before they can even talk to you before getting the results back. Slav1 agrees with me, writing, "Next time, get the money first, then you make him fail the final exam." Our next story is, my boss fired me, so I took his master's and PhD title. I had a rich boss once that was only rich because of the wealth from his grandparents. Guy was a complete and utter moron. He made nonsensical financial decisions and burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars in completely avoidable mistakes. But because he had money from his ancestors, he just shrugged off these losses and continued. He had also only but the faintest idea about his company, or how to lead or keep employees. I was basically keeping the company together. As such, I was the naysayer that blocked 90% of his stupid plans and decisions. Due to my negativity, I was fired. The guy was also arrogant as heck because he had a master's and PhD in economics. I thought, no way in heck can this guy have a master's/PhD, he's so dang stupid. So I searched for his master's and PhD thesis, went to the university library, and what a surprise. On the second page of his master thesis, found a text passage without citation. After like 40 minutes, I found another 10 passages he copied without citation. I spent only some 20 minutes examining his PhD thesis and found already 2 cases. I made pictures of the text passages he copied and the books from where he took them, and wrote an anonymous email to the university. A year later, he lost both his master's and PhD because of his plagiarism. I know this from people that still work with him because he exploded. The university just thanked me but told me they can't provide further info due to data protection. So either he had a ghostwriter write it for him who didn't care, or he just copied and thought he would never be caught. He wrote both in the 80s. Chances are many master's and PhD theses from these times are plagiarized because there were less possibilities to check. After all, imagine it's 1985 and you're at the University of Chicago, and during a trip to Miami, you visit the library and write of a thesis there. If you change the title, there is almost a 0 chance that you will ever be caught. So if you have stupid bosses or people around you with a degree that are older and did you wrong, it might be worth your time to check their thesis. You know, I've got to be honest, I've never actually bothered to learn how the master's and PhD things work. All I ever got in life was community or technical college experience. I never really tried or considered to do any further college experience, so I have no idea how getting a PhD or a master's would even actually work. All that to say that I had no idea that you could just look up somebody's thesis they wrote from the mid-80s and point out they didn't cite something, and boom, they just lose it like that after, 40 years of having it? Mother Was a Hamster wrote, "Master and PhD are not achieved with a single thesis or dissertation. So this story does not seem credible to me. If you found plagiarism in this PhD dissertation, that does not prove he plagiarized his master's thesis. If he didn't cite the passages, how do you know what books he took them from? Did you read every book in his bibliography? Our next story is, think I'm homeless because of the way I dressed? Have fun waiting outside. We rented out an Airbnb in a neighboring city to spend the weekend there. It was in an apartment complex, and the only way you could get in was through a fob key. There were two entrances, one from outside that took you into a vestibule, and the second was from the vestibule into the lobby of the building. My friend, 26-year-old female, and I, 25-year-old female, went downstairs to smoke. We were wearing hoodies and sweatpants and stayed under the building canopy as it was raining. These two older ladies, mid-40s, that lived there were trying to go into the building and were giving us some pretty dirty looks. They were whispering to themselves in French, thinking we couldn't understand, and said something about us being homeless. My friend and I were done smoking and wanted to head inside too. Someone was coming out of the building at this time, so we all tried to go in at the same time. Well, the two older ladies went in and tried shoving us back out, thinking we were trespassing, and aggressively closed the door behind them. My friend and I were in utter disbelief. I understand that they probably weren't used to us being around and didn't believe we were staying there, but they could have just been polite and asked if we had a fob. Anyways, we used the fob and got into the vestibule. They seemed to be fumbling around for their keys. They didn't have to use it coming in because they intersected with someone coming out of the building. It seemed like they had forgotten their keys upstairs, and I could tell they were panicking. My friend and I used the fob again and got into the building. They looked absolutely baffled, and guess what we did? We got in and closed the door behind us. They were too embarrassed to ask us to let them in and continued to fumble around for their keys. My friend and I wished them a good night in French and went upstairs. Not only was the revenge satisfying in this story, but one of my favorite genres of stories is a situation where somebody is speaking bad about another person in another language, thinking that person can't understand them, only to have it revealed to them at the very end they understood every word. Crystal wrote, "The best part was definitely wishing them good night in the language they used to crap talk you just a few minutes before. Perfect." Our next story is, so first come, first served? Okay then. This is actually my son's story, shared with permission as he doesn't have Reddit, but we both agreed this is an enjoyable petty revenge story. When Son was assigned to his first duty station in the military, their dorms were actually really nice 3-bedroom townhouses shared by 2 military members. Son arrived to the greeting area and met his new roommate. Son is easygoing, a thoughtful guy that doesn't seek out conflict, and was absolutely looking forward to having a great relationship with his first roommate. Both of these guys were 18 at the time. Roommate is actually from that state, with family and friends within driving distance. Son is over 3,000 miles away from anyone. He tries to make small talk. The guy is kind of loud and braggy, immediate talk of guns and boobs. So the topic of bedrooms are brought up, and Son jokingly says, "Should we play rock, paper, scissors to decide who gets which room?" The guy reacts angrily and says, "No way, man, I got here first. I get the master bedroom. First come, first served," with what Son described as a nasty smile. They weren't actually at the townhouse yet. They separate to continue processing. Son arrives to the townhouse to find roommate's bags just inside the entry door, roommate not there. His bags were not in the master bedroom. First come, first served, right? So in my son's bags went right into the master bedroom, but that's not all. He went into the other room with a queen bed, tried out both beds, and realized the second bedroom had a better bed than the master bedroom. So he physically swapped the mattresses, putting the better mattress in his new, very large master suite. They were stuck together for 3 years, and Son never regretted his moment of petty. He greatly enjoyed his bedroom for those years, especially as an escape. His roommate never ceased mumbling about how unfair the master bedroom situation was, but had no idea about the bed switch. Son dealt with roommate, determined to leave the thermostat at 81 in Florida, leaving dishes out, again, Florida, ants, and his hobby was collecting tires and keeping them in the dining room. If I had to deal with a roommate in Florida that set the thermostat at 81 in humid, sweaty Florida, left dishes out for ants to appear, and I'm sure there's going to be things like gnats and roaches are pretty common in Florida, this guy sounded like a nightmare roommate in general, so you need that escape. Frangible Soul wrote, You just kept adding and adding right up to the end. Love that he kept the bed thing to himself. Our next story is HOA rules. Happened in the late 90s to a good buddy of mine. Lived in Bay Area, California, in an old subdivision built 1900s to 1930s for the most part. HOA is super relaxed, mostly not enforced unless a big issue, basically used to upkeep gardens in the neighborhood. JD is building an addition on his house. He asked the folks on all sides if it was an issue. It was not. Several neighbors had done similar. Folks behind them, Lori, said it was cool. Addition is built 90%. Lori is friends with Maria. She lives 5 to 6 houses away. Maria puts a bug in Lori's ear about how terrible this is, finds the clause in the 1912 HOA that the addition was 3 feet over the limit. JD tries to say that these are old, outdated rules that he can give 12 plus examples other people have violated, no avail. JD gets a cease building notice, told to tear it down. 10 months legal battle. Literally ruins the relationships of parents, kids, just a huge pain in the butt over nothing. Lori avoids JD and family. Maria is smug and a huge jerk speaking at every HOA meeting, taking the mantle on this fight. Literally yells at JD and his wife when she sees them. JD gets word the final decision is coming to a head. All parties involved in a packed HOA meeting. Maria pressed her point to get it torn down. JD gets up and says, "Okay, fine. I'll accept your ruling to tear it down. If we're going to stick to the letter of the law of these outdated rules, then turn to page 127, section 1. No minorities will be allowed to live, rent, or stay in said neighborhood." Goes on to list every minority you can think of. Maria is Hispanic. Her face goes pale. JD goes, "Are we done with this bullcrap?" They were. HOA rejected. He finished addition. Neighbors all hate each other. Maria moved away shortly thereafter. Jerks and HOAs. JD won, but they even moved away a few years later. Didn't need to happen. I mean, I get the HOA still being around, just mostly to try to make sure everything's kind of maintained. But is it not agreeable to say that it's ridiculous that they've never revised rules from over 100 years ago? I guess these are some HOA conservatives that stick to the rules as they were written 100 years ago and must be interpreted as such. Until, of course, the racist stuff comes out. Groovy Yaya wrote, "Before you are a stickler for the rules, you should read all the rules." Whether you're part of a corporation, on a nonprofit board, or live in an HOA, the bylaws and rules should periodically be reviewed to see if they still apply. Our next story is, try to do us dirty? Now you have to wait an hour. This isn't so much petty revenge as much as it is petty delight and comeuppance for a couple who try to do us dirty. Maybe petty revenge by proxy. There is this pretty cool island about 20 miles outside of the city I live in. It has one major road that goes around the whole island and a bunch of beaches. You pick berry farms, farm stands, and wildlife. And my friend and I wanted to bike around the island for a day. The island is such a great little day trip without having to go far out of town. The way to do this was to bike 5 miles to the edge of town to catch a bus that goes to the island. The bus runs only once an hour. We get to the bus stop about 25 minutes early. We lock our bikes to the bus stop pole. I go into a coffee shop and get a cup of coffee, and my friend starts chatting with a couple of people sitting at cafe tables on the sidewalk. About 5 minutes before the bus is supposed to arrive, I unlock our bikes from the bus stop pole. As I'm doing this, a couple bike up and get off their bikes and wait next to me. As soon as the bus pulls up, the guy runs to the front of the bus with his bike, pulls down the bike rack, and sticks his bike on the front, and his girlfriend follows suit. Despite our protests that we were there first, the couple just ignored us. There were only 2 spaces for bikes on the bus. We were clearly there waiting for the bus before they were. They got on and sat down in the back, and my friend and I politely asked the bus driver if we could please bring our bikes inside. This normally isn't allowed, but the only other people on the bus was the couple. The bus driver said okay, and we brought our bikes on the bus. We thanked him profusely and set off to the island. We had such a lovely day biking around the island, a little swimming at the beach, a nice picnic lunch, berry picking, and doing the whole loop around the island. We get back to the bus stop around 6 o'clock and have half an hour to wait for the next bus. About 10 minutes before the bus is supposed to arrive, that same couple shows up at the stop. They sat about 10 or 15 feet away from us as we were sat right in front of the stop. The bus pulls up and my friend and I put our bikes on the rack and board the bus. As we're taking our seats, the guy is begging the bus driver to let them bring their bikes inside the bus. The driver is having none of it and keeps telling them no. There isn't anyone else on the bus except me and my friend, and the driver still tells them no. The driver shuts the bus doors and starts to pull off, and the dude is ticked, arms flailing and yelling. My friend and I were laughing so hard, they would have another hour to wait for the bus. They had no issue when he tried to put us out for an hour. Whether or not you do believe in it, this is like the perfect example of karmatic justice. Just an ultimate example of what goes around comes around. The only thing Coder Joe 1 and I want to know is, wow, any chance it was the same driver? Our next story is, fire all my favorite colleagues? I'll get you fired and get your position. This is an old story some of my friends told me, 29-year-old female, I should share here. So here I am. This started a few years ago after I got ghosted by my ex. I decided to switch careers and took the proposal of my brother to work for one of his friends in an organic grocery store in my area. I was 22-ish at the time, maybe 21 turning 22, but anyways, I started working in the fruits and vegetables aisle. Despite having a crazy director, I liked my job and my department manager. After a few months, I got the title of third key, which is basically I'm the assistant manager when the assistant is gone. Then they decided to hire a new customer service manager that I'll call Linda. That woman was crazy. While I was 23 at the time, she was only 20, acting like she owned the world. To give you an idea, in the span of 8 months being here, she got 11 employees fired for stupid reasons. And since our director at the time was just as crazy, it was easy for her to get her way. Also, when I say stupid reasons, I'll give you a few examples. Benji got fired because he was talking too loud in the break room, and it was disturbing her peace and supposedly making her harder to rest to come back fully ready to finish her shift. Marie got fired because she had to take off work to go to a relative's funeral and couldn't give her 2 weeks' notice. Rose got fired because she was getting too old to do her job properly, and it was ruining the pace of the team's work. Which is BS. I've never seen someone cut veggies and fruits as fast as her, and I could go on. Yes, some of them could have been able to be protested against and even file a complaint against her. Mind you, outside of Rose, everybody was too young to just want to fight for a grocery store job. Even Rose just decided to take her retirement earlier and freaked off the work world. Anyways, she took it too far when she tried to mess with me. To give you the context, we had a huge special on lemons, and sometimes those fruits can get rotten and you don't notice it because there's no smell. The only way you would know is by going through the several small boxes of like 10-ish lemons and look at them all one by one, which I did regularly, but hey, I'm not a robot. Sometimes some of them slipped out of my eyes. I was leaving the back store with more boxes when I saw Linda with a customer that seemed more than ticked. So I go see both of them because, mind you, she has a lemon box and I work in the fruits department. So it's kind of my job to help if I can. That's when I asked her, "Hey Linda, do you need help with the lemons?" And right away she told me, "Freak off, I don't need your help. I already spoke to your manager. Go do your job for once." My face was literally like the flushed emoji as I went to my department. Even the ticked customer did a bombastic side eyes. A few minutes later, I go to the back store to fulfill the missing products, and my manager pulls me aside. "Hey OP, stay out of Linda's business. I can't protect you all the time for talking back." I stopped him right away asking what does he mean, because as soon as she told me to freak off, I did freak off. He looked at me surprised and said he'd come back to me with it, but only tomorrow because he's finishing his shift and for some personal reason, he can't stay longer to solve the issue. Since Linda was the manager on guard that night, he told me to stay in the back as much as possible to stay in her good graces. That's what I did. 1 hour after my manager left, I heard my name being called in the front office, shared by the customer service manager and director. Big what? I go in the front and all of my colleagues are looking at me like I'm a prisoner going to their death sentence. Mind you, I know my laws and my rights. I might be young, but as soon as I got called, I started reciting in my head the main laws and rights she has to respect. I open the door's office and Linda is fuming, and she is alone. She asks me to close the door and I tell her, "No, it is my right to have someone in the room with us for this talk. I am not comfortable being alone with you." She starts freaking out and starts to speak louder on the verge of screaming. Linda, this room is recorded 24/7 and the customers can hear you talking to me like that. Lower your tone and find a witness to be in the room or I'll go back to work. She stands up to look outside the office and sees that indeed, there's a line in front of the cash looking to the office's direction. She takes a few deep breaths and calls Gabrielle, who takes care of the finances of the store so she can be a witness. From the moment Gab got into the room, she seemed like she wanted to get away. So do I. Gab took a seat in the back and Linda starts her whole speech. I'll be paraphrasing because the meeting took almost an hour. She said, "You know why I brought you here, right?" I replied, "Not really. I've been in the back store minding my business. Why?" Linda says, "Well, you disrespected my authority in front of a customer and that's a big no-no for the company." I say, "For the company or for you?" Linda says, "OP, this is not the topic. You shouldn't be disrespecting authority in front of customers. It makes the managers look bad." I reply, "I was honestly just trying to help because you had a box of products from my department. I just wanted to help because the customer looked ticked and I didn't want him to ruin your fragile mood." Linda replies, "My fragile mood? Are you freaking serious?" I tell her, "Linda, we are being recorded and we have a witness. I'm asking you to stay polite and not scream, or I will file a complaint against you." Linda replies, "Are you threatening me?" I tell her, "No, I am stating my rights and making you aware of where your attitude will lead you. I won't accept being talked like that by someone that ain't even my manager." Linda replies, "Okay, OP, let me remind you where your position stands in this business." That bench started to draw a triangle, put her name at the tippity top and mine at the bottom. I didn't even let her finish what she had to say. I stormed off the office, went into the employees' lockers, took my stuff, and headed out. Linda ran after me yelling like a psycho, "You can't leave like that, you're still scheduled for the close." I stopped on my steps, making Linda almost run into me, and said with the most blank expression I could have, "Linda, you crossed a line, and since you're so good at your job, close my department for me. I will be filing a complaint against you," and left the workplace. Next morning, I came to work as usual and had to see my manager and the director. I explained to them the whole situation and showed the papers I was about to send to file a complaint against Linda. Also, this dumb bench didn't even throw her pyramid in the trash. It was still on display when the director came into work and asked me what it was. I asked her to look at the cameras, put the sound on, and listen to the whole meeting. We watched it to my director's horror, and who came into work in the middle of our screening time? Linda. She came into the office, and Linda, being a piece of crap, turned white as a ghost. I've never seen her being so pale. "What are you doing?" The director asked Linda to sit down, and we watched again the video. Mind you, it took us 1 full hour to watch because she was in a never-ending power trip. She used to be smart when she was bullying and making stories about past employees, doing it far from the cameras, and usually using the other office that doesn't have cameras or a microphone. But she wasn't with me. I guess she got comfortable or whatever, but checkmate on her butt. My director said I could go back to work with my manager, that she would take care of the rest. 2 weeks later, Linda still had her job, but our director resigned from her job right away, which was super weird, but whatever. We got a new director. She was a total sweetheart, and she noticed Linda's crazy power trips right away. She decided to launch an internal investigation, but sadly, all the employees Linda bullied were fired. There was only me and my little complaint waiting to be served. When Nancy, our new director, came to me asking if I knew anything about Linda, I gave her the file, the timestamps of the videotape, all the employees she fired for stupid reasons with the old director, and also phone numbers of those employees. Flash forward 2 weeks later, Linda left work earlier, bawling her eyes out, yelling how Nancy was a bench and didn't deserve her job, how she always came in earlier, put in the work, and yada yada. Nancy waited a few more days before asking me to come into the office, and again, I'll be paraphrasing because a lot has been said. Nancy said, "Hi OP, don't worry, you're not in any trouble. I just saw your CV and noticed you've had a lot of experience in customer service." I tell Nancy, "Yes, I used to be a cashier for almost 5 years. It was my first job. Why?" She replies, "I've seen your file, your CV, and how you managed the conversation with Linda. We are actually looking for a new customer service manager since Linda's been let go." I ask her, "What about my actual position?" Nancy tells me it's easier to find a fruits and vegetables commiss than it is to find a competent service manager, as you experienced. I ended up accepting the position, and all my coworkers cheered for my raise. I don't want to brag, but I've always been the one to defend everybody in the place, making sure I'll keep my job in the process and following the laws and rights. A few months later, Linda came back to the store as a customer, and the look she had on her face when she saw me at the cash with the manager uniform was priceless. It was even more priceless when she asked me when I got the promotion, and I told her the exact date, which matched her departure. "So you got my position when I left?" I just nodded and asked if I could do anything more to help have a better experience in the store. She didn't answer to that and just left after paying her things. To this day, it's still one of my favorite moments to have been through. I'm not a petty person, but if I can ruin you in the process of me trying to defend my people, I'll be more than happy to do so. Last I've heard of Linda, she was working for the competitor, but never had any promotions. What sucks in situations like this is that you can let somebody like Linda go, and then if another place is going to hire them to a position of power yet again, and they call this place asking for a reference or for whatever, most places are not going to actually share any of the real details of why they weren't working there anymore. I think the best you can do is kind of allude to it. I've heard in some places you're liable to some kind of legal issues if you actually share any real details or whatnot for whatever reason. So sadly, it's not surprising that Linda would be able to flip and still get some kind of decent-ish job somewhere, even after being a nightmare for so many people. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.